Well, everybody knows the Zimbabwean voice now, so that's for sure. And it's a beautiful voice, that one. One of unity, one of togetherness, one of peace, one of love, you know. That's the way forward. Oga, Oga.
Prince, thank you so much for meeting with me. Of course, you know, we discussed offline, I'm a big fan. I say that because I'm not in Zimbabwe right now, but I speak on behalf of many people. Like when you move away from home, when you're at home, you sometimes maybe take certain things for granted in terms of having culture around you. But when you move away from home, you become a lot more appreciative, or you almost you're appreciative of the nourishment that you got culturally when you're back in Zimbabwe. So when we watch content that you guys make, it makes us feel a lot more connected. So I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. How are you doing?
I'm well, man. Thank you for the opportunity, and also kudos also for the work that you're doing in shifting the narrative about a beautiful country in Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much. I think it's a collective effort, and I think people like you are doing the work. So, but yeah, I appreciate the kind words. But tell us more about. I think for everyone listening, they might not know who Prince is or Magriza Made Me Cook as a brand. Tell us more about how you guys got into content creation, and just shed more light on Magriza Made Me Cook as a brand, so we can just start there.
Okay. Thank you, brother. My name is Prince Sivalo Mahlangu. I'm producer and the content creator for online show that's known as Magriza Made Me Cook. So the term Magriza is slang for ugogo. That's in Ndebele. So where I come from, grew up in the streets of Bulawayo in Maputo North. So we've got a way of playing around with names. So ugogo. I think by then the pop culture was saying, let's just try to spice his name up. And so the guys in the street will say ugogo is Magriza. So Magriza is my maternal grandmother. And my friend, there's a guy called Tao. He actually came up with the term Magriza Made Me Cook. So the objective of Magriza Made Me Cook is to document and serve Africa's diverse food cultures, and also to air other cultural and traditional stories that have never been documented before. We started this journey in 2020, COVID year. Actually, our first video was during the pandemic. When I was starting, the channel was known by my personal name as Prince Sivalo Mahlangu. So when I started, I'm also a fitness trainer. We'll talk about it a little bit later. So the video, fun enough, was a fitness video. So because my friend was saying, you need to, because I was stalling, I was like, sometimes you're afraid of bringing out content because you think that you think people are going to, what are people going to say and so on. Then I was like, no, just start with something. Then what you really have to do will just manifest. It's something that will come along the way, but you need to start working on the journey. So we did the first video. Then the second one was like, you are a fan of traditional, I don't like the term traditional, I'm just using indigenous. You're a fan of indigenous food. Why can't we just do a video on that, you cooking in the kitchen, then we start talking about these dishes. So another motive or inspiration for me to be on YouTube was the fact that most of these foods that we grew up, that we love, that we eat, that our grandparents, our fathers grew up eating, there is no information on the internet for that. It makes it very difficult for the new generation to be appreciative of these foods when one did not have the database to get these foods. That was another motivation, like, okay, I just want to normalize talking about these foods that define us, if you look at the perspective of foods that are so rich, are so nutritious, and define our identity as a people. So we started doing that. Then after 10 episodes, that's where the name changed. from the personal to Magriza. Yeah. So our core business or our core focus is to do documentaries that highlight what we term African thought. So African thought is appreciating that us as Black people, we've got indigenous knowledge systems that are actually that actually work, and that we just need to start talking about them and start believing in them. Yeah, so that's the premise of the show.
Ooh, there's so many ways I can take this. But yeah, all very valid points. I think the first point is, I mean, COVID was tough for many reasons in terms of that period, but even this YouTube, I mean, my podcast started during COVID also. I don't know what it was about that time that made you just say, like, you know what, like, we're all in the house anyway, so why don't we just do these things that we have been thinking about for a while? For you, I think my first question was, who is your friend? Because your friend, I think, or friends who are like, nah, Prince, I think you can do this thing. Because they were almost important piece to your journey, like to say, who are the friends, and yeah, what are their thoughts on how things are going now?
Oh yeah, so when we started, we were two. My best friend is called Tembani Paraj. So he does the editing on the show. So it's sort of like, unfortunately, I get the credit sometimes because I'm
the face.
but there are guys who actually do equally the work that people see, because editing on its own is a creative process. So he is the one who was saying, no, I believe in you. Let's just start. We don't know what this thing might take us. So let's start. And what we want, the universe, we just sort of like develop that concept into what people see now is Magriza. But when you start from the videos, from the first video to now, you can see there's a progression. And it's something I love progress. So it's something that I'm happy. From the first video in COVID and to the videos that we're doing currently, you can see all, the guys, there's now a change in the presentation, there's now in the change in the sound, now in the change in the color grading. We now study a lot, we now research more. So it's something that I attribute that to Tembani. And in terms of the editing, the guy is a beast because he comes from a musical background. I'm personally, as a producer, I always want sound to be okay. I would rather have good sound than bad visuals. So he's good in that. Very good in that. So he's the one continuously motivates me. Even my family, I come from a family of foodies. My brother, older brother, is a chef, is a food scientist. My young sister, is a chef also. So we grew up in a family. I grew up in a family who love food. Talk about food. Food that's very important. Social need, that's very important. So my family, my son, I've got a son who's also a COVID baby. So, funny enough, when the show started, he came to this world on the 6th of November. So I always say he's a twin to Magriza. So I always look up to him. And sometimes when you try to keep up, you think, no, there's a guy who's just behind, who's making. So it's something just to soldier on.
Phenomenal. When I was looking doing some of my research, I looked at some of the old episodes. You could see, of course, you said you come from a fitness background. And of course, there were a lot of episodes where you're cooking in the kitchen. I know when we spoke offline, you spoke about how you went from the transition to going from cooking food in the kitchen and kind of trying to educate people that way, to then combining the kitchen almost tutorials with culture. Like, maybe speak about how that transition happened and how that journey, unfolded.
I'll attribute that to two factors also. So the first one, when you look at the videos, they are too technical in the sense that it's me in the kitchen explaining a recipe. Nothing much about where that dish originates, what the name came from, and why do you mix A and B. It was just me saying, you take the maize, you combine with the melon, you cook this for 4 hours, then you have a dish. I felt that the stage we are with our African food, so many people would not understand. For people to love African, I believe if they understand the context, they'd appreciate the food. So if you now tell them, no, this is taken from that, That's why it's named like this. People start saying, oh, okay, actually I didn't know about that. So it was my design now to say, how can I shift from that being technical to something that people becomes more philosophical. People start understanding. It becomes more why. Why do you combine A and B? Then secondly, I attribute this to Uba Patisanyat, historian here in Zimbabwe.
Big fan. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. Yeah.
Cultural expert. So he saw me doing the work, then he called me. They said, no, come sit down. I just want to tell you, say a word of advice. He said, what you're doing is okay, but try to factor in, because food is culture. Actually, food is a cultural expression of the people. So just try to capture now the element of culture, but do not go away, don't lean or don't derail away from your main core of cooking of food, but also try to look at the cultural dynamics, which are so rich, which are sort of like cultural connotations within food. And people will start appreciating those dishes.
And then that's how it came about. I mean, on that point, I know I've also been on my own journey of African thought myself. But I feel like what sometimes happens is that when we're at school, we're taught certain schools, and I've been lucky enough to go to good schools, and I'm appreciative for that. But what you end up being taught in such a way that the African perspective is not valued. It's not valued, or it's not even incorporated in the textbook, or there's no African insight that is incorporated. So you end up not consciously, subconsciously thinking that the African has no contribution to intellectual thought or technology or science or advancement. And the more I kind of grew up, I was like, nah, but that can't be. It can't be. I know it can't be. So of course, I've been on this journey of African thought to think. And then Baba Patisanyat has been incredibly just informative, and that's saying, don't just look at the thing, and in your case, the food that's being made. But what's important is to try and understand the context underneath why the food is being made. Or to any, let's say, cultural dance as an example. Don't just look at the dance is cool, but what is the intent underneath the dance? And once you start to understand, and then once you start to understand digging for the intent, you'll be amazed at the power or the thoughts or the, just the excellence of people that are kind of constructing, of course, these structures underneath the things that we see on the surface level.
Yes.
So I think for you, so he called you. So my question is that he called you to say, man, that's really cool. Because he's written a lot about this stuff, food and all of these things, right?
Yeah, because I think he's also a passionate cultural expert also. And he's written a lot about books. But you are saying he loves the way that we at the show are taking it, in depth. In terms of just to add on what you're saying on why like Western education would never appreciate African thought is in the sense that they don't understand, they assume it's bad or there's something in that. And the premise of everything is that you look at racism also. The premise is that you've got a person who thinks that they are superior than another person. And the other person is inferior. So within that mindset, whatever you say, or whatever you do, whatever you dance, whatever food
it cannot.
There's something wrong. So unfortunately, what we've done now, we're trying to mold our cultures around other people's cultures, which is a mistake, because our cultures on our own are very, very, very unique. It's something that calls our relationship with nature, Patisanyat calls symbolic manipulation. You're talking about the dances. It's not like people just the feet. No, there's the reason why certain dances are done by women during this period for the rain and so on. So it's symbolic manipulation, and that's what the African is very good at. Is very good at analyzing the environment, analyzing nature, and now doing a record of what is seen. So they can never appreciate that. So unfortunately, as you say, in the academics. I also come from an academia background. I used to lecture, I used to teach in university. So that's one thing also that I can say I took a sabbatical, but decided to do this. What I'm doing was that when you write a research and they'll tell you the first line of thought in terms of your references have to start from Europe and America. Then the African has to be, the final approach has to be the last. To me, that was like, okay, so an African scholar can never come up with new information in regards to their own culture. So the European now has to tell the African on how to dance African dances.
Correct.
The African person can never do that. So I understood that perspective. But just to add on, African thought is something that's there. As you say, just look at the manifestations. Okay, let's look at the architecture. You look at just architecture, the African heart. Those guys did not learn, they did not tape measure, but all their hearts were secular. Everything was special. It's you understand that that is something that's phenomenal on its.
So poignant. I think there's like a gap. I feel like, I don't know if it's a knowledge gap, but there's this step, of course, between, let's say, Great Zimbabwe, and it's undeniable when you go to Great Zimbabwe. You cannot deny it that an intelligent people created this, and it's still standing with no cement. Of course, this is advanced technology that's still standing today, right? People have to be intelligent. Unfortunately, I mean, even when I go to class now, I think I had just to tell a brief story. We learn I'm sure you know, via case methods. Of course, there'll be a case, and you're just reading basically different cases from across the world. And the first African story came, let's say, 3 months in. And of course, it was around poverty. It was around people who cannot do anything for themselves. Even if it wasn't about poverty, it's like the fact that it felt like that to be saved. And I said to my lecturer in class, out of my class, I was like, I have an issue with the perspective through which this is written, that whenever the African is brought into a conversation, it's always from the vantage point of someone that needs to be helped and saved, rather than someone that has agency, that has insight or intellect to solve their own issues, you know? So very point that I think what you guys are serving is kind of this, is shedding light into who we were as a people. I think even who are we before we were Zimbabwean, as an example, or Rhodesia? Who are we before that? I think I'm more interested in that, even though, of course, I call this show of Zimbabwean Voices. The more I dig into this deep, sometimes like names can be good, but they can also come with negative things. Sometimes when you say Zimbabwe, it can kind of encapsulate you into a particular idea, you know?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But if you think, well, who are we before we were Zimbabwe? What was practiced before then? And you might look at the surface level, but why was it practiced? Then you'd be interested, like, oh gosh, people could bring down rain. Like, you'll go to Njelele and go, wow, okay, what does that mean? Do you know what I'm saying? So maybe just for everyone listening, I mean, I saw an episode when you went to the Matopos recently, and of course, you go there quite a lot. Why is that area specifically culturally relevant? Maybe speak on that so that everyone listening has a bit more context around Matopos.
Okay. I think when you look at the definition of culture, culture is human interaction with nature. I would define it in that perspective. So a place that now shows, or that signals what I'm saying now is Matopos. You just look at the nature, just look at the culture of Matopos, and just look at the people who resided in that place, from San people, the Galang, the British also came through, and how the name of that place has changed from Ematoje, became Matobo, came with Matobo with a P. So it shows something that is culturally rich within Zimbabwe. And important also, we've got our rainmaking shine, right? Njelele. There's also another one in Escotine called Gilo, but Njelele is a famous one. And having that area, and when you go there and you just look at what I was saying about symbolic manipulation, the African see the importance of that, you know, paying respect to nature. So every time when, like the episode here, I think it's a Plated Poet episode.
Yeah.
We wanted to provide, like, also what we do on the show is want to talk about these places, so that people get to understand. And you just need to normalize talking about this. Just like food, our food, you just need to normalize eating the plate of okra that they say it's when you eat that you're poor and so on. But you just need to just continuously normalize so that yourself you could understand what the huge impact that thing has. So it's the same with matobos. Talk about matobos, we talk about njelele. So we wanted to do something cooking in front of njelele, but what we're cooking, we wanted to symbolize the importance of njelele. And when you look at njelele, it's sort of like a mountain. It's like a pregnant woman, pregnant person. So that's something that's got, it gives birth, gives life. So every time, even personally, when the city life gets to my head, I just drive to the place, and it's just so quiet, and you get to get your thoughts, get your head in order. So I'm a big fan of Matobos, big fan of Great Zimbabwe. There's so many places in Zimbabwe that I would recommend anyone to come see this beautiful country.
Absolutely. I think nature is, one of our, not just assets, but it's also, even like if you look at totems as an example, I used to take it for granted that family will call me Shava. Some people who don't call you by my name, they call me by my totem to this day, and I'll take it for granted as just a thing. But of course, if you look underpinning that, it's like we have culturally, you know how conservation is a big thing now. Like they talk about conservation or the green movement. Like it's not, but whereas culturally for us, it's always been embedded.
It's always been with us, yeah.
It's always been embedded. So when I call you, let's say Mpofonzo, like this is, there's certain things, there's respect for culture, respect for animals. It's actually embedded, in the culture. What has been the biggest thing that has surprised you, or at least one of the biggest things that you have learned throughout this journey? Like, because you've seen from food to the matopos to, of course, symbolic manipulation with our relationship with nature, to the relationship with, let's say, our ancestors, right? Sometimes we've been taught to, let me take a step back. I think what happened with, like, I'm a Christian myself. What happened with Christianity was that when it came, the thought was that there can be only one truth that can exist, and it cut off every other truths. Whereas I think one of the big things we very forget is that multiple truths can coexist. That might be true, but it's also true that something else can coexist, and they don't have to be at odds with one another, right? So so when I watch yourself back, there's like all this stuff happening. What's the biggest thing that you've learned? Because you're exposing multiple truths that aren't harmful, but are part of who we are. So what's the biggest thing that you've learned,
I think what I've learned on a bigger scale is that as a continent to go forward, we need to unlearn a lot of things. I think that's the first thing that we need. I think we're done learning. We've learned a lot. I think what we need to do is to unlearn, because we do a lot of, the unfortunate thing now, even when you travel to the rural areas where we go to seek some of this knowledge, what we term the proponents of this, some of them do not know these things now. Some of them, they know, but they now term them demonic. It's outdated. So that's why I was saying earlier on, I'm not a fan of the word traditional. Traditional,
right,
is associated with something that's primitive. So when you say traditional food, we are saying, okay, there's traditional food, but there's another type of food that you have to compare. So I just pray also get to a time where you say our food. So that is, we need to unlearn. Then two, the African lacks confidence. I would say this. Because why do we lack confidence? Because we're culturally deficient. We do not know the power that we have as Black people. Black people are magical. Black people are just so
literally.
Other races know that, but we don't know. Yeah. We don't know that.
Right.
So sometimes, just to go back to racism and this systematic injustice, is the fact that they know the power of a Black man and the power of a united Black person or a united African is it's a danger to some cultures. So that's what we need to appreciate, that I am Black and I am proud. I love my melanin skin. I love where I come from. So, like you said, I think you asked a very important question. What were we before Zimbabwe, before colonization? And Magriza, we always look at the food in that dimension. What did our ancestors eat before colonization, before that made them so healthy, so fit that go 100 years, they could, it was the diet that that they ate. So let's try to offer that in terms of content to people that know what you term demonic. Because for example, you've got the sorghum, Istrala, Isata, sorghum, and one from pearl millet. People here think it's demonic to eat that, or they'll say that is sand, that is I can't eat. Not knowing that maize came with the Portuguese in 17th century, but does not contain any nutritional values. So having those components and trying to get them on the show, I think has been a big revelation for me as an individual, as a person who loves cooking. Then also another thing that I've learned is that in Africa or in Zimbabwe, we've got many ethnic groups.
Yes,
I also don't like using the word tribe. We are identical, man.
Say more on that.
We are identical. We just, I'll talk about the food because that's where my job is. A dish that is cooked in Cholocho, you find the dish in Chimanimani. What's different there? What would be different is just the name, and sometimes the way that food is cooked. But you see, no, this is just the same thing. So what it means now, if we share the same food identity, or it means that we also share this other
commonalities,
other elements like the language. So another thing that we're told in Africa is that we've got many languages. That's false. We've got few languages, many dialects. So when you say there are many languages, someone when someone starts speaking in Karanga or in Kalanga, because they think it's another language, but it's another dialect. They just close off their I can't hear what you're saying. But if you understood, no, languages, there are so many dialects, but they are just the same. You can listen to your brother, you can listen to your sister speaking in another language. You speak your own language, they speak their own language, but you understand each other.
Completely. I remember I used to live in Johannesburg. Of course, South Africa is, I mean, just like Zimbabwe, it's very multi. And what would be normal is somehow you speak Zulu, I speak Xhosa, and everyone will understand each other. Or what I've been trying to study more, maybe I'll call it study, sure. Just I've been doing a lot of research around root words. So let's say they say Abantu, Vanu. It's like the how I would say it's different, but it has the same shape, or it might have the same root word. Do you know what I'm saying? And you might find the same shape in a word throughout different dialects, which speak to a common ancestral root, if I can call it that, right? So you're completely right. Of course, there's the food example, but then even sometimes if you look at language, sometimes I'll hear Xhosa people speak, and I speak Shona, but I'll be like, there's certain things that I can, or hear Venda, you can just hear like, I can at least follow the shape of the conversation. I can see the shape, which would be kind of surprising. Unfortunately, what happened, I mean, not to go too deep into that, is like I've also been doing a lot of reading around like division, or let's say, okay, you are Manika, you are Kalanga, you are whatever. Whereas it's like, is that true? Is that true? Like, of course, I might be Kalanga per se, but isn't necessarily true that there are tribes, as an example. Obviously, there might be tribes or different dialects, but how divided are we versus not? Does that make sense? So I'm trying to find a book now that speaks about the intentional divisions of people and how that's a very useful, and how that was useful to control. So as you say, it's unlearning. It's like I'm trying to get to the root of issues to figure out, oh, that's where that happened. Okay. Yes. So when that happened, before then, what was there? Does that make sense? You know?
Yeah. I think also on the cultural deficiencies that we are suffering as Africans is we fail to ask or fail to just question things. So
we don't want to ask. We don't want to ask and push and question things.
Yeah, we don't ask. You just, when someone say no, that's wrong. But you say you just have to ask. What language are you speaking? No, I'm speaking Tonga. Oh, where does Tonga come from? No, it comes from in areas of Kenya, but it's also predominantly there in Zambia. And then you start. Oh, okay, there are words that you are saying that are there also in my language. So how did these come? You now start saying, hey, so back in the day, these people, how did they live amongst one another? How did they, remember there was, because now I'm saying, no, I can't hear what you're saying. Let's use English. But how did the Xhosa and the Swats and the Pedi trade amongst one another? It was the same language. So you're saying South Africa is a good case of the diversity of language. I also once stayed, I did my master's in South Africa with the Xhosa. That's why actually seeing the Xhosa people being proud of their culture.
Very proud.
United something, because I believe Zimbabwe is still lack in terms of culture, representing our culture so well and without any shame. But the Xhosas would do it so well, they'll talk about their food. They'll start singing their songs. They'll wear their own regalia. So there in South Africa, you find a Xhosa person and a Venda person talking or arguing. But they're like, this guy, but they'll finish everything. Everyone goes on. They understood that. So I think one of the questions that I saw is like, what would I want to see? What I want to see is, especially in Zimbabwe, is cultural representation, where we're able to have different cultures out, different languages out in the open, and people getting to learn and understand. Problem also as Africans, we are running away learning French, we're learning these other languages. Who's going to learn Nambia? Who's going to learn Kalang? Who's going to learn Shangan? Who's going to learn Sesotho, Tswana? So we also need to start teaching, start learning these languages. We're not saying you have a PhD in that language, no. When you understand the basic language structure, life becomes easy.
Yeah. And that's the challenge. It starts with finding importance and the value of it first. To say like, you have to find, do you see value in that? But people will say, but how can I get and so it always comes down to the system. It's like, but if I learn that, can I earn a living, or can I find work abroad? Or it always comes down back to that. But it's finding value in it for value's sake, not necessarily for any outcome, but just for value's sake. On that point, tell us about you, Prince. Where were you born? Of course, it's a journey that a person gets to being passionate about these things. Where were you born and how did you grow up? Tell us, let's start there, just so at least we have context on you as a person, you know?
Okay, I was born in the city of Bulawayo, 24th of October, 1989, 89 baby.
89 baby.
I grew up in the city of Bulawayo, born and bred in the city of Bulawayo. So I come from a family of 5. I'm a twin with my sister. She stays in SA. 2 brothers and 1 young sister, make us 5. So we grew up but in the affluent side of Bulawayo in Benside. So I did my education there, Hillside Primary, grade 1 to 7. Went to a school called Gifford High School. I've been to 2 schools only. Then went to NAST, National University of Science and Technology. Then went to University of Fort Hare in the Cape. But long story, I come from a family that sort of like with cultural stalwarts, people who love culture. My great-great-great-grandfather was a close ally to King Lopemula and Queen Lo's K. So that cultural DNA started with my great-grandfather. It was something that I tried to run away from, but kept knocking. My grandfather was an author, Ndebele author, Peter Sivalo Mahlangu. Those who might know, he was actually the first guy got a master's, I think, in Zimbabwe. He ironically also at the University of Port Harcourt. So he did the documentation also in terms of Ndebele literature and Ndebele. Have you seen on the show? I love African languages.
You love, you speak Ndebele. Also, Sean, I'm like, damn, he speaks 3, 6.
And for the guest, anywhere that we go, the person has to talk the language that they are comfortable with. It's us find the interpretation, even when we come back to Bulawayo. But if someone can, even we did the laws, I think in terms of the nation, they're very few, but we did that, and the people were so open. So I'm a fan of African language. In African language, there are several idioms, there are several problems. Because we're slowly losing our way when we do not communicate. So he was an author in that. So did came back after doing masters at Forte. That's where now the dream started of, like I said, the migration from the academics based on that thing. Where I personal view, I'm not saying it's a fact, but I'm saying I think it's more Eurocentric in terms of the underpinnings of academia, especially when you look at the context of Africa. So I was like, okay, let me do something where I can start telling stories of my grandmother. Because we moved from Benside to a township called Makwekwe North in Bulawayo. It's about 4 km from the CBD. So then I have to tell you that was a blessing in disguise when we shifted, because there was an eviction that had done. My father used to work at the National Railways of Zimbabwe. So then we moved, big story. But when we got to live with my grandmother, that's where I started to learn about culture. When you stay in the low density, there's nothing, because there's no interaction with your neighbor.
Of course.
And by then, all of my friends were white people. I used to go to a white school. So come back home. My father tried to speak with us in Sindebele, but because of the conditioning, it was very difficult. Because I speak 90% English, then at home I get it's 10%. So no matter what the elders can do,
that's always win.
Yeah, because the school, the community does the same thing. So when we went now, then started doing it in subtle ways. Because in the area where we were staying, like when you speak in English, people are like this guy.
But this guy.
And then, come on, chief. So you started becoming ashamed, but also at the same time, let me learn Sindebele, let me learn what these guys are saying. Then she's now started to teach us about food, because she's still alive, she loves food. So she now tell us about, no, when I was growing up, my great-great did this. So it was interesting, the storytelling also that she has with. Then she would teach us about some life teachings. No, as a man, don't do ABC. No, as a woman, don't do it. Or when life comes, because another problem that we're facing as young people is we do not have elders that are telling us what to do when adolescence meets. When you get to 17 years, boom, you go stay alone. There's nothing, it's going to a job. There's no job. So that was the role of our aunties, the role of our uncles, was to make sure that you are groomed so well that when you get into the world, it's now like, okay, we've done our part. Here's the button stick. Go forward. But without that grooming, you sort of lose what we are supposed to do. And I always say now, the importance is to know your role in life. Know what you're supposed to do around people and so on. So my grandmother did that for me. She instilled the pride of culture that you see on the show. I'm not ashamed, and the food that we talk about is what I cook at home 90% of the time. It's what I cook, and I'm proud to eat that. And also on the health side, we know there's no debate about that. It's very healthy. So that's how the growing up. I'm a sports person also. As I said, I'm a fitness trainer. But in prime, I used to play, I think, all this hockey, cricket, swimming.
Cricket,
Rugby. I used to be in high school, went to play rugby, played cricket also. Yeah. But now I'm just focusing also on fitness. Love books. I really love books. Because the people that they don't know about me is I'm sort of like an introvert. I think I'm an extrovert in front of
I
camera.
wouldn't see it. Right, but behind camera, you say,
in front of camera, I become alive. Yeah, but off camera, I'm sort of like, when people come in, I'm a quiet guy, and I just start talking. So books gave me that solitude where I can just go in my room and start reading. So at an early age, my grandmother also started introducing me to African writers. You talk about Yongugu Wathiong, you talk about Charles Mungochi, you talk about Wole Soyinka. These guys were who by then had seen the importance of African thought. Especially you look at Ngu and what he's doing now. We were saying every novel, book that he writes, is first of all writes in his own language, then he translates into English. These things that are nuggets of wisdom that I got at an early age. I love traveling. I love gardening. Always in the garden, I'm not in the kitchen. I love people. That's another thing I love people. I love meeting people, getting to hear people's stories, and also sharing. And I believe sharing, as I say, is caring. And every time you meet someone, they will teach you something that you don't know, vice versa. So in a nutshell, I think that's
that captures it all. There's so many things I can touch on. The first thing is, you said I was running away from it, like, because it's clearly in your lineage, right? There's like a lineage of cultural heritage, right? What were you scared of?
I think, like I said, I think it's on the unlearning part, conditioning. Even if we won't say university, man, when you look at primary school, I remember taking my brother's daughter to preschool on first day. So I was talking to her in Zimbabwean. When we get to the door, the teacher says, okay, enough with that funny language. Here we speak English. So, but it's also a person who was in the Zimbabwe also. So you understand, then this system that's sort of like, when you get there, who you are, we just sort of like remove the coat. There's a new coat for you. So you've got people who grow up, you're conditioned now that the external
to hate yourself.
Thank you. You're told that at school, you're told girls with dreadlocks can't enroll. Dreadlocks are not allowed, but braids are allowed. Okay, so you find the system now that so I was in that thing where you're like, okay, when you sort of like speak, it's in the way, like, when you're grade 7, this is, you look cool when you speak English, you know. You know where we come from in Zimbabwe, something that we pride ourselves in. We speak the best type of English and so on. So growing up and going to high school, but like I said, it's something that's in you, will never leave. It will keep on knocking. It will keep on knocking. Then that's where I discovered, like, no, but this is who I am. Language is part of my culture. Language is part of a people's identity. So once I start shunning this language, it becomes, I'm actually shunning myself. And when it started falling out, I started reading books of Ndebele authors. I discovered the beauty of African languages, man. And that's where our goal is in how our languages are structured. Because remember, it's not the same as the other languages. We'll use proverbs to say something. There are idioms that are covered in African languages. And you just look at how they were so wise to express what they were thinking. And that to me was something. So to answer your question, I felt there that being cool was to do things that are foreign to me. Being cool was to sing, watching, and not I'm saying anything wrong with that, but like following other people's cultures, other people's trends, and neglecting my own culture. If you love your own culture, you would any day learn another person's culture, but there's that foundation that's there in you. When you get there, you and you filter what's applicable to you. But if you don't have cultural foundation,
that becomes
tomorrow,
the
exactly. Tomorrow you're taking that, then tomorrow you're taking that, you're just at 6s and 7s. But when you've got a cultural foundation, when you love yourself, it's easy now to just appreciate another person, another person's culture.
So poignant. It's like it starts really early, this thing. It starts really, really early. What it's called, like they call it language oppression. That's the expression that I heard. It's like, but then I was watching a Pati Sanyati interview, and he talked about how language is like a reservoir for culture. So like you think it's just language, but it carries information. It carries deep, rich information. So if you cut off a person's language, you're literally cutting off generations of information and knowledge systems and all of these things.
Yeah, because when you look at language, the English language carries English culture.
Correct.
The Ndebele language will carry Ndebele culture. The Karanga language will carry Karanga culture. So just look at when you cut off. Imagine where you say you're not supposed to use English.
Yeah.
There's no gate to the English culture. So that's the importance now of language. It carries people's culture, people's identity. Something that's very important.
I know there's a tremendous irony, you and I having an English conversation. There's a tremendous irony. But I think it's like, it's part of the journey, right? It's like today it's this, but tomorrow it's unlearning and unlearning. Today it's this, but tomorrow it might be something else. But I think it's important to at least have the conversation on this frequency for now, and then hopefully it can then change. Do you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean?
Because I think like English, there's no problem with any type of language. The problem that I have is when people attach a language to intelligence. That's where the problem. Then they attach another language to being inferior, being backward, being primitive. That's where the problem. So they can now using English makes their status up. So the same would apply eating English food. They will think the status goes up. Eating their own food, their own language becomes sort of like. But it would be nice if you could speak 5 African languages, but English. You've got that's the power of diversity.
Yes, completely. I think the tough thing about African languages is that embracing sometimes identity also comes with, because they say self-love is like a revolutionary act, because you've been taught to hate yourself. So if you start to love yourself and live like that, it comes with pushback. Like you saw, just like your niece, as she walks in from the gate, she's already being met with force. If I'm to start doing the same, if more people start to doing the same thing, it will be there'll often be societal push, which is it's messed up, but it's a journey. I think the work that you're doing starts with at least shifting perspective. That's always the idea of this podcast. It's like speaking about it, and then maybe we can shift the narrative on African culture or African food or African thought. Is it valuable? Like there's the 2 examples, like you spoke about you living with your grandmother, and I watched the interview. I know she loves herbs. I watched the video with her. She loves herbs. But I was in South Africa. I was away from home for a long time, and I went home for like 3 days, and I had all my auntie, like I have my auntie Winnie around and some other aunties, and you know, like when you've been away from home for a long time, I just felt like just being with my aunties for 2 days, I felt so nourished. And I said, geez, who is raising us out there when we aren't here? Like who's raising us out here when we aren't? So I know what you mean when you said like sometimes when you cut off people from their culture or social structures. So for example, like let's say if you look at how we used to live 100 years ago, for example, like now what happens is that when an old person gets sick, like there's this current stress where, do you do nursing homes? In the modern way we live, do we do nursing homes? What happens? But if you look before, people live in close proximity to each other. So of course, there's 3 generations of people living in the same structure. So it's designed, it might look primitive, like how can you live with your grandmother? But it's actually a social structure that's designed in a particular way where old people teach the grandkids, and of course, and everyone lives together and sharing roles, as you said, like what is their role in this structure? and it's very sophisticatedly designed. Of course, when you live away a lot, like myself, being around my aunties, you start wondering, like, geez, how much are you being cut off from nourishment or culture and information? So it's part of me having this conversation is like trying to connect to that, right? The source of information, like people like yourself. In terms of, to bring us full circle, you use this analogy of a buffalo, life being like a buffalo. Could you speak to us about that analogy?
Okay.
I think it's an important place to kind of just end off and bring us full circle.
Okay. I think it's also just to draw on your auntie's experience. So last year, 2020, when my son was born in the hospital, when I was waiting, when they were in the ward, like these thoughts came running to me, like, hey, when this guy like grows, when he's older, what am I going to teach him? So yeah, so the question is like, what are we going to teach our children when we grow old? So what it means now, are we conscious of the things, of the decisions that we're doing presently that will now act on the children as they grow up? Because when life will begin knocking and life will demand answers, so who will they to ask for? And it's just the basic things. What am I going to do? Or I'm in a relationship with this person. What's the advice? How can you advise someone when you do not sort of like show the character of someone who's a good advisor? So within the village, there's a proverb that says, "Inyati ibuzwa awaphambi." So Inyati, the buffalo, the direct translation is you basically ask the direction of where the buffalo is from someone who has seen it. So it means to someone who's either coming, let's say you're walking and then someone's coming in the direction that you're going. They've actually met the buffalo. Then they'll tell you, no, the buffalo is just 5 kilometers from here. But when you go, don't remember why they use the buffalo. If you look at it from the wildlife perspective, the buffalo is very unpredictable. Yeah, you see there, then it just does a 360, it comes from behind. So the elders now took specifically that animal. They could have taken a lion, they could have taken, but those are predictable. Those are the types of life. But a buffalo, they will tell you, nature will tell you the unpredictability of the buffalo. So the buffalo is an analogy for life. So when they're saying the way do you ask the buffalo, you're saying you ask people who experience life before you, your elders. So you'd ask them, if you've got a problem, I'm going to get married. You'd ask someone who's been married for 20 years. I'm going to you ask a business person who's been in business for quite some time. You want to start a podcast. You go talk to Dumi. You want to start a podcast. What do you do? That is where now the analogy of the buffalo came in. You actually ask advice from people who actually experience life before you.
And what is the most potent piece that you've learned from some of the people that have come before you that you could share with everyone that's listening today?
What I can share is that it is important to continuously learn. It is important to humble yourself. We now live in a world of ecocentrism. We now live in a world of social media where now everyone, there's no one, when you go to Twitter, everyone is saying something. No one wants to listen. No one wants to listen. Everyone's got an opinion. So everyone's got an opinion. Who's going to listen? So humble yourself down to earth, like my grandmother would say. Listen. Then when you open your mouth, make sure it's something that enriches someone's life. So that's the most important thing that they taught me. And also to know who you are as a person. To know who you are as a person. And also spiritually, when you look at the other guys, the Buddhist, even African spirituality, they'll tell you the day you're born in to discover your purpose is that's where life happens now. Life starts. When you now know your role here on this earth. So, but now we now live your whole life not knowing what am I supposed to do. Or when you discover, no, my purpose is to do A, B, C, D. The life changes, man. your life changes.
What do you think your purpose is? And you always ask this question to all of your guests. You said, what impact do you want to have on this world? So I'm asking you the same question in reverse.
I remember when I like off camera, when I told them I'm going to ask you this question, they asked me that first. Like, I think on the impact, I regard myself as a storyteller. I want these stories to enrich other people's lives, especially looking at African thought. The African you are blessed, the African you are magical, phenomenal. So my role is to uncover this in people. That what the food that you have, it's something that you can be proud of. Where your family, even if you are not talking about the holistic basis on the culture, just your family. Do not just now, you do not know, people don't know, are not in touch with their aunties, your uncles, especially the children of your aunts or your uncles. Imagine if you touch with just your family tree, your family lineage, understanding where your family is from. So I think my is just to put out the stories and people sort of like draw inspiration from. Like I said, people can. I draw so much inspiration from the musicians. I just want to do also Oliver Mpukuzo or Live on My Jaiba and Salif Keita, Yuma Segela, the new singers also here, so that the work, even when I'm gone, people can actually open that cupboard and get some wisdom.
Prince, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. You're a well of knowledge and information. It has been so insightful. So thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Tim. Thank you so much. Thank you for the invite. And also, kudos to the
Thank you so much. I appreciate your kind words, sir. And that's us.
Traveling down the road, back to a time when we were strangers and apart. I had never met anyone like you, and I must confess that I had never been so jealous to feel the stress. I am so taken by you. Oh baby, I'm so taken by you. Hey! Mangwanani, Oga Oga, Hani no Muka. Chaga uripiko, baby, baby, wachoro nani, agrieve zane iko, hey, hey, ona mangwa nani, oga, oga, ani no muka, dobu chaga uripiko. I'm so taken by you. Hey lover, I'm so taken by you. Us taking a stroll, me holding your hand, we having a chat. I'm hoping that we go out again. You seem surprised, I can see by the look in your eyes. I said let's talk about it, you say you have to decide. You've been through many men, some of them you'd rather forget. Conscious bottles of love that left you rather upset, and now you're crying. I never made to see you shed a tear. Always brought around, she finally noticed that I care. When I'm willing to be there, what to do, giving my all, what to do, catch you when you fall. Girl, I love you, you're my African queen, the only one I see in my sweet African dreams. Mangwanani. Searching, searching, finding no more. Lokutaga uripiko, baby, baby, watoro nani. Agrielezane iko. Searching, searching, mangwanani. Oga, oga. Searching, searching, finding no more. Lokutaga uripiko, baby, baby, watoro nani. Agrielezane iko. Every morning, 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 mamba kweza. Pandino muka. Ooh, yeah, exhale.